course, this has led to questions from a lot of scholars of why the cholas held so much importance on Bharatanatyam and the Devadasis. Like, why did they even care? There were so many different art forms that they could be promoting, and why did they really uplift Bharatanatyam the way that they did? Hello and welcome back to Background Voice. This is episode, I can't remember, I'm losing count, I don't know when I'm going to upload this. This is the channel where I talk about whatever I want. I do a whole load of research and then I let you know what I found out. And now and then I'll sprinkle in my own opinions and experiences so you know what my take is on the whole topic as well. So yeah. Before we start with this episode, please do like and subscribe because it really does help me out, and we'll get on with today's episode. Most of my topics so far have been quite dark. And because of that, I wanted to do something a little bit lighter. I basically wanted to do an episode on an aspect of my culture that I really love, that I'm really passionate about. And that aspect is Bharatanatyam. I'll be doing loads of these little episodes here and there where I'll be talking about history or art forms or literature or key figures within South Asia, and just exploring these topics and explaining the significance of them to the culture and how they may affect our lives today or modern South Asians. So, why am I passionate about Bharatanatyam? Well, it's because I have studied Bharatanatyam since I was 4 years old. I stopped at around the age of 17 when I started studying for my A-levels to go to university, and then I just didn't have a chance to explore dance anymore, but it doesn't mean that I've fallen out of love with it or anything like that. I'm still very interested, but recently I've been thinking of restarting it. I'm looking for teachers and just doing reading, research and watching loads of amazing dancers in the meantime. So I thought, why not have this discussion? I also now realise I probably should have done my makeup or dressed a bit more Bharatanatyam-y. I'll put up a picture of what a Bharatanatyam dancer usually looks like. But actually I have no makeup skills. I can't do the eyeliner. The most I can probably do is the lipstick. Probably not very well. This is my attempt. The jewellery is also not on point. It is what it is. So you know how in all my other episodes I say how I'm not an expert. Even though I'm not an expert in Bharatanatyam, I would say I'm very knowledgeable about this particular art. So let's go into what Bharatanatyam is. In India, there are 8 main classical dance forms. There's Bharatanatyam from Tamil Nadu, Kathak from Uttar Pradesh, Kathakali from Kerala, Kuchipudi from Andhra Pradesh, Manipuri from Manipur, Mohiniyattam from Kerala, Odishi from Odisha, Satriya from Assam. So maybe I'll do a series on each of these different dance forms, but today's topic is on Bharatanatyam. Bharatanatyam started in Tamil Nadu. The exact date of when Bharatanatyam started is unknown, but it started appearing in scriptures at around 2,000 years ago. Bharatanatyam is most commonly danced by women, but it's not gender specific. There are male Bharatanatyam dancers and male Bharatanatyam teachers, choreographers, but a lot of the depictions from ancient times usually show female dancers. So Bharatanatyam is characterised by the stance that a dancer would take. So a dancer would stand with an upright upper body with the legs in a bent position, and the feet would keep the rhythm, while the hands would do mudras to depict stories and tell a lot of Hindu stories throughout that particular dance performance. And you can probably tell now that I realise it when I'm looking at myself speaking, that we use our hands a lot, because I use my hands a lot when I speak, and I think this is from Bharatanatyam. It might not actually be the case, but that's what I've noticed. And Bharatanatyam, even the name, is really significant and tells us what the dance form is. So we can actually split the name Bharatanatyam into two parts, so Bharata and then Natyam. So the Ba from Bharata stands for Bhavam, and Bhavam is the feelings, the emotion and the facial expressions that a dancer would be trying to portray when they're performing. So the Ra from Bharata stands for Raham, and Raham is the melody. So you would of course have music that you would be dancing to, and a lot of the time this music would be devotional music to certain gods. And so you've got this, I would say you are marrying the music, the devotional aspects of the music with the movement to tell a story. Then the Ta from Bharata comes from Talam. Talam means rhythm. So this is what dancers will be keeping with their feet in order to move the dance forward. And the last bit of Bharatanatyam, the Natyam bit, Natyam is a Sanskrit word for dance. So you basically would say, basically the translation of Bharatanatyam is a dance expresses emotions, melody and rhythm. So while the legs of the dancer hold the rhythm, you've then got the hands, and the hands will have a variety of different mudras. We'll be moving through different mudras, and these mudras are basically just gestures that will tell a story. And it's not just limited to your body. The bhavam, so the feeling, is shown through abhinayam. Abhinayam is facial expression. So what you're doing with your eyes, your mouth, just the general look of your face. This is how you're portraying the emotions, and you're moving from character to character when you're telling the story. Here is an example of what Bharatanatyam looks like. And like I said, we're using our hands and showing these mudras in order to tell the story. There are about 30 different base mudras in modern Bharatanatyam. And what we'll do is we'll put these mudras in different patterns in order to symbolize something different. So, for example, we've got the Pitaka mudra. And this is one of the base mudras. It's the first base mudra. But depending on how you put it together and how you move the Pitakam, you'll end up portraying something different. So if you were to put your hands like this, that for Natya Rambam, that would mean the beginning. Then Vari Vahe would be the clouds. Vane is forest. And Vastu Nishedane means to reject. So there are a large number of different mudras and different mudra patterns that are put together and that have different meanings, and then these are put together by the dancer, the choreographer, in order to tell a particular story. And of course, a lot of the time these stories are Hindu mythology. So now that you know what Bharatanatyam is, let's go into the history. Historians have seen Bharatanatyam mentioned in the Natya Shastra, which is a Hindu text on performing arts by a Bharata Muni, who was a sage. The Natya Shastras were completed anywhere between 500 BCE and 500 CE. So as you can tell, Bharatanatyam is very old, and despite the fact that it's appeared in texts at this time, it implies that Bharatanatyam has of course existed far before these texts were even created and its existence was documented. The dance that we now know as Bharatanatyam was actually initially referred to as a Siddhir Natyam during the ancient times. Siddhir refers to dancing in royal courts, which was the original purpose of Bharatanatyam during ancient times. So during the ancient eras of India, Bharatanatyam was used as entertainment for royal kings and for nobility. And Bharatanatyam was studied by girls known as Devadasi, also known as temple dancers, and they would come and perform for the kings during banquets or big religious or political events in order to portray stories that were key and relevant to that particular event. And these Devadasis were actually known as servants to the king. So they had devoted their lives to this dance form, to learning this dance form in order to perform for the kings on pretty much a daily basis. Bharatanatyam was always important as a key form of entertainment, but accounts have shown that it was most prominent during the Sangam period and the Chola dynasty. So the first written record of Bharatanatyam was found in the Sangam period, and then the furthering and the sudden growth in Bharatanatyam was due to the Chola dynasty pushing this art form. And if anyone doesn't know who the Cholas were, they were a family, I guess, a dynasty within Tamil Nadu that were very prominent, and they had a very large influence. They were very well known for their warfare tactics and for having a very large empire. They're also one of the world's longest running dynasties as well. In the popular Tamil epic Silappatikaram, written during the Sangam era, the central character, Kovilan, is the son of a wealthy merchant. Kovilan's mistress, Madhavi, was a Devadasi woman who was given the same importance and respect as Kovilan's wife, Kanagi. Even though breaking monogamy was considered a sinful act, Madhavi was still treated in an honourable manner. The Chola dynasty actually started in the 9th century and then ended at around the 13th century. They were well known for their wartime abilities, through which at its peak, the Cholas were able to expand all the way to the northeastern borders of India. They also expanded their influence outside of ancient India to areas like Indonesia, to Singapore, to the Maldives, and to Southeast Asia. What really set the Cholas apart from a lot of the other dynasties was the prominence and the importance that they put on Tamil art, literature, architecture, music. And they really did lift this up and try and expand its influence outside of just their areas within Tamil Nadu. The Chola Empire promoted the Devadasi system, and Devadasis were then also known as Deva Adigalar. Deva, which means God, and Adigalar means servant. Thus, that made the Devadasis servants of God. The Devadasis during the Chola dynasty were well respected and given haven in the Chola Empire. Of course, this has led to questions from a lot of scholars of why the Cholas held so much importance on Bharatanatyam and the Devadasis. Like, why did they even care? There were so many different art forms that they could be promoting, and why did they really uplift Bharatanatyam the way that they did? Of course, at the time, they probably weren't thinking about justifying their actions, so we don't really have a proper account on the reasons, but scholars, having read a lot of the literature from the time, have come up with a few possible reasons. One of the most common theories was that during this time, India stated that devoting girls to their temples would help improve the welfare of the empire. This idea is very similar to what a lot of cultures have done around the world, where they basically have a sacrifice to the gods in order to get something out of it, in order for, prosperity and growth and healthy living for the whole empire. So this possibly was a form of sacrifice by the Cholas, but a more humane sacrifice where no one was dying. People were just learning an art form, because these Devadasis were devoting their whole lives just to Bharatanatyam, and they believed that by devoting these girls to the temple as opposed to having human sacrifices, it was the ultimate sacrifice to the gods, because they were doing a sacrifice with kindness and purity as opposed to bloodshed. Another prevailing theory about why the Devadasis were so important to the Chola era revolves around the relationship between Bharatanatyam and Hindu religion. Bharatanatyam was viewed as a sacred dance because of its links to the gods and to retelling Hindu stories. And because of this, this is where the caste system ends up playing a big role in Bharatanatyam and its history. Most of these Devadasis, pretty much all of the Devadasis at some point, were people from higher castes, where their families would offer them to the temple for prosperity of the land. And it was only people of upper class that were allowed to dance in the temple. Now, that doesn't mean that lower caste people weren't allowed to partake in Bharatanatyam. It just meant that there was a cap on where they were allowed to dance. So even though they weren't allowed to dance in the temple, they were allowed to practice this art form when it came to weddings or puberty ceremonies. Basically, it was permitted in any sort of function which didn't have any religious connection. And this link between Bharatanatyam and religion, and therefore also the caste system in India, is because at that time, art, religion, politics, all of them were interconnected, and there wasn't really a separation between any of this. So, in order to understand the religious aspects and why there is this link other than the storytelling aspects of Bharatanatyam to religion, why Bharatanatyam is linked to religion other than the fact that it tells stories, it's really important to look into the mythical history of Bharatanatyam. Is that Lord Brahma had passed on this dance form to the gods, and the gods had performed this dance form and had put their own little influences into it, and then over time passed it on to the mortal world. The most prominent god when it comes to Bharatanatyam is Lord Shiva, and it's Lord Shiva when he takes on the Nataraja form. So this Nataraja form is Lord Shiva's form as a cosmic dancer. In the Nataraja sculpture, Shiva is known as the source of all movement within the cosmos, and the god whose doomsday dance, represented by the Arch of Flames, accompanies the dissolution of the universe at the end of an eon. So Nataraja is the form that Lord Shiva takes on when he becomes the cosmic dancer. And within this form, he is said to be a creator. This cosmic dance form has become a key to Bharatanatyam because Bharatanatyam is based on the 108 positions that Lord Shiva takes whenever he's in Nataraja. And we've taken that for Bharatanatyam and turned it into its own dance form. Of course, with everything, it's not exactly got this nice, easy history. There is, of course, a darker aspect to Bharatanatyam, unfortunately, and that's during colonization. So after the Chola dynasty had, I guess, dissolved, Bharatanatyam was still around, but it wasn't uplifted in the way it was before. And then when ancient India was colonized, slowly we started to see the decline of this art form. During the 18th century, Bharatanatyam was struck down from being this respectable religious dance to basically just fun. Viewings and studies of the dance were also discouraged by colonial governments. Christian missionaries and government officials had started to cast Bharatanatyam and Devadasi dances in a bad light, mostly because of their links to royalty. There was so much contempt for this dance form that in 1892, Christian missionaries had launched a campaign to ban Bharatanatyam amongst the other Indian classical dances altogether, and they succeeded in their efforts in 1910. When the British colonial government officially banned Hindu temple dancing and Bharatanatyam was deemed illegal. You see, during the British Empire, there was no actual use for the aristocratic systems within India, but they didn't exactly get rid of these kings either. They let them be, but these kings just had no power anymore. And the Devadasis, their power and their respect was linked to their close proximity to nobility. So now with the nobles having no actual power, the Devadasis were quickly forgotten, especially because they were financially reliant on these kings. And because of this, a lot of Devadasis had entered a state of poverty. And Bharatanatyam started to slowly lose its bond to religion, and the dances being an offering to the gods. So, and like I had mentioned, during the Chola dynasty, a lot of the Devadasis, well, all the Devadasis were upper caste women. But when we enter the colonial period of India, the Devadasis were no longer from the upper caste because there was no financial gain from being a Devadasi. But during the colonial period of India, that's when the lower castes and those who were deemed untouchable became Bharatanatyam dancers, became Devadasis. And devotional music was no longer allowed. Religious and devotional music was no longer used during this time period, and a lot of the music that these dancers would use basically made them seem inferior and were usually quite demeaning. So because of that, also a lot of upper class families would only send their daughters to be Devadasis as a last resort if they felt like they had no other options, because they might not have been able to get married at the time, and they needed somewhere to send their daughters to in order to hope for some sort of future for them. With this, because of its now, I guess, complete cut-off in this period of time from the original religious and holy aspects of Bharatanatyam, it started to be frowned upon to be a Devadasi and Bharatanatyam dancer. But all hope is not lost, because of course now we have modern Bharatanatyam and many people do still study this art form. So we need to know what happened. Why was there this sudden shift from uplifting Devadasis to lowering them and considering them low status to now where we are at in modern society? So people had actually fought for the ban to have been lifted on Bharatanatyam, and over time many of these people, and I will put their names here, had succeeded in their mission to bring Bharatanatyam from basically being banned. But that didn't mean that Bharatanatyam had evolved, and that's where a series of very important individuals come to play. So modern day Indians were not happy about the Devadasi system and how it worked. They felt that Bharatanatyam and having a personal life shouldn't be mutually exclusive options. They believed that the girls could dance liberally without having to devote their entire lives to the temple. And Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy, who was a physician, freedom fighter and women's activist, was just not satisfied with this Devadasi system and fought for its eradication. Even though she wasn't a dancer herself, she felt that women did not have to be subjugated to the Devadasi conditions in order to learn this art form. She fought relentlessly and was able to present a bill to the Madras Legislative Council, which eventually became the Devadasi Abolition Act. It contained hundreds of conditions about this Devadasi system. The most notable changes being that it was illegal for girls to become Devadasis. Anyone who would pressure girls into becoming Devadasis would be imprisoned for up to 5 years. And this act also allowed prior Devadasis to give up the role and be granted the same rights as other women in India, which included the right to marry, because Devadasis were prohibited from marrying when they were offered to the temple. And Dr. Reddy's struggle is one of the key reasons why we no longer have the Devadasi system, and why many girls can perform Bharatanatyam and enjoy its art form without it having to be linked to them being an offering for the gods, and for them to actually have the rights to live their life and still enjoy learning dance. Also, like I had mentioned, the Devadasi system had links to castes, and one of the key figures of trying to eradicate this link between Bharatanatyam and the caste system was Krishna Iyer, who was a Brahmin lawyer. But because he was a male with no Bharatanatyam experience, his view was not exactly respected by a lot of people at the time. And this is where many other key players came in, helped him with his struggle and his fight to get rid of these links between Bharatanatyam and caste. Rukmini Devi, who was an activist, also shared Krishna Iyer's belief about Bharatanatyam. And even though she had no experience in dancing, she made sure to learn and she became an expert in Bharatanatyam. She was also a Brahmin, and their joint efforts helped them rejuvenate Bharatanatyam. She also fought for the rights of a lot of these Bharatanatyam dancers, and when I say that, I mean she tried to eradicate this view that society started to have of these dancers. And one of the things that she tried to do during her fight for bringing Bharatanatyam back was to remove the derogatory elements of Bharatanatyam that had been brought in during the colonial period, in order to once again reshape society's view of this art form. And she replaced these songs that were once again derogatory, and she replaced them with spiritual elements and brought back those religious aspects. She opened the Kalakshetra, which is a Tamil Nadu state-sponsored Bharatanatyam academy, and many people now learn Kalakshetra Bharatanatyam. It's practiced by many people around the world, of course India being the main centre for Bharatanatyam, but I mean, I don't live in India and I've learned it, and there are many people around the world that are teaching this dance form, learning this dance form, and exploring its many beautiful aspects as well. So yeah, that is a guide to Bharatanatyam's history. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!